Good morning, St. Philip's family. It is a great joy to be here with you to discuss another one of the great hymns of the church that we will be singing on Sunday. And this particular hymn is one that has ancient roots. In its original form, it was a Latin hymn written in the 500s or the 600s, that is, in the 6th or 7th century. And that hymn continued to be used after it was written every time that the official Roman breviary was used for the dedication of a new church building. So this hymn was sung when many of the beautiful churches that we know of today in Europe were built. And it is a hymn that is appropriate for that because in English, the title is Christ is Made the Sure Foundation. And in Latin, the title of it is Angularum Fundamentum, or Angularis Fundamentum, which is the same thing, that Christ is the foundation of the church. And we don't know exactly who wrote this hymn originally, but it was used regularly in worship. It came to England early. It was known in the Sarum community around Salisbury Cathedral very early on. And it is a hymn that is rich in its theology, and it also is set to a particularly beautiful and appropriate tune. The tune of it is called Westminster Abbey, and it is by the great English composer Henry Purcell, who wrote it in the 17th century while he was the organist at Westminster Abbey. And in fact, Purcell is now buried in the aisle near where that organ stood, where he would have played this hymn. It is a wonderful hymn that talks to us about Jesus being the sure foundation of our faith. Listen to these words from the first stanza. Christ is made the sure foundation, Christ the head and cornerstone, chosen of the Lord and precious, binding all the church in one. Holy Zion's help forever, and her confidence alone. It's a beautiful image that draws on classical architecture about how cornerstones, capstones, headstones, these bind together all of the different forces that are at work in the building of the church so that the church holds together, and that Christ is the one who binds all the church in one, who is our help and our confidence forever. In the second stanza, all that dedicated city, dearly loved of God on high, in exultant jubilation, pours perpetual melody, God the one in three adoring, in glad hymns eternally. And originally, when this hymn was sung, it was a sequence where this was the second part to another hymn, Urbs Beata Jerusalem, that is about the heavenly city, the New Jerusalem. And here you see this gorgeous image of this dedicated city, the city of God, where melody is pouring out perpetually, adoring God the one and three, that holy and life-giving Trinity, whose love and grace and joy are overflowing in the city of God to all those who are there, and that the response of the hearts of all of those in that city is to turn to song, to adore God the three and one. And then the invocation in the third stanza, to this temple where we call thee, come, O Lord of hosts, today, with thy wonted loving kindness, hear thy children as they pray, and thy fullest benediction shed within its walls alway. And that is a great prayer. It is a prayer asking for God to come and be in our midst in worship, in our earthly tabernacle, in these churches that are constructed for his glory. And so it is particularly appropriate to think about this hymn being used the first Sunday when a church was dedicated, asking God to come and inhabit through his Holy Spirit the praises of his people, understanding that the church is the people, not the building, but that the building is the place where God's people gather and that his presence is welcomed and invited there. And then the last stanza, here vouchsafe to all thy servants what they ask of thee to gain, what they gain of thee forever with the blessed to retain, and hereafter in thy glory evermore with thee to reign. And this is talking about our prayers, the things that are the desires of our hearts that we are setting before the Lord when we come into his tabernacle, into his presence, to pray, to lift our hearts up to him. And we're asking in this last stanza that God would give us those things that accord with his goodwill for us, and that as we obtain them, and when we lean on his promises, that we would hold on to them forever through this mortal life and into that great life in the beautiful heavenly city of Jerusalem. It is a gorgeous hymn full of rich theology and lots of really interesting architectural imagery. But it gets even better when you know a little bit about how we got the English version of it. It was translated by a brilliant Anglican clergyman named John Mason Neale. John Mason Neale was born in 1818 in England, and he had a father who was a brilliant clergyman and a brilliant mother as well. And he went to Sherborne School, one of the great boarding schools in England, probably most famous as the alma mater of Hugh Bonneville, the guy that plays Lord Grantham in Downton Abbey. But it is a terrific Church of England school, and there John Mason Neale excelled, and he became known as a brilliant writer there, and did extremely well academically in Latin and in Greek and in English, and went up from there to Trinity College, Cambridge, where again he had a brilliant career and was generally regarded as the most brilliant student in the college that year. And he had developed early on a great gift for poetry. And so there was a very famous prize given in England called the Seton Prize for poetry that had a sacred theme. And John Mason Neale won this not once, not twice, not thrice, but 11 times by the time he graduated from Cambridge. It was quite a remarkable achievement. He went on from there to become one of the founders of the Oxford movement, a high church movement within Anglicanism. But he spent his ministry at a place called Sackville College, which sounds like the Sackville Bagginses in The Lord of the Rings. And it is a place in England that was established for ministry to down and out poor men. But John Mason Neale, in a way that transcended his times, took that ministry and expanded it greatly, bringing in unwed mothers, what were called fallen women at the time, and then eventually founding a separate institute called St. Margaret's that became one of the first training colleges for nurses in England. He had a long and wonderful ministry, and part of that ministry was writing hymns. He wrote hundreds of hymns. He also wrote dozens of books, but he is perhaps best known as one of the most brilliant translators of hymns from the Latin and the Greek. And today's hymn is a perfect example of that. John Mason Neale captures not only the theology of the hymn, but the tone of the hymn, the language of the hymn, and even more than that, he was determined to make the hymn work so that metrically, that is, in terms of how it's sung, it could be sung equally well in Latin or in English to the traditional tunes. That is quite a remarkable achievement, and as someone who has done some work in translating, I can attest to you that it is highly unusual to find someone that has that level of skill. So when we sing this hymn, it is a reminder to us that Jesus is the cornerstone, the foundation of our faith, that everything holds together around him. And part of what probably attracted John Mason Neale to this hymn to translate is that he was a great lover of church architecture and the symbolism of church architecture, and how churches that had architecture that was theologically informed could fire the soul to worship God. And our own St. Philip's is a great example of that type of architecture. So as we sing this hymn and listen to it in the future, I hope that you will give thanks to the Lord for the beauty of the tabernacle we have here, but even more so for the great beauty that is in Jesus Christ, the foundation and cornerstone of our faith. God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.